Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for your punctuality. It's nice to see so many faces already, and it's just turned 11 o'clock. Elaine, I think I'm going to have to learn how to set my background to have a Hireserve background for these sessions.
I'll send it to you.
We are going to wait probably until about a couple of minutes past to actually start this call. Start the session rather. We had somewhere in the region of about 70 registrations for this, which is very exciting. And we're up to about 19 at the moment. So just give it a minute or so and see if people drift in.
Shall I share my screen in the meantime?
Mm-hmm.
Now, disconcertingly, I can't see any of you, but hopefully you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Good stuff.
All right. I'll just start with the intro then, and more people will, I'm sure, drop in as we go. So, yeah, Johnny, if you want to go to the next slide.
No worries.
So, as you can see, it says application forms and killer questions. That is the session that we are doing today as part of the next instalment of the Hireserve University. Elaine was due to be on holiday, but she's back. So I apologise, Elaine, that I don't have you in as a host, but you're quite clearly here on the call, and we're very grateful for that. Elaine is going to be moderating the chat, and if any of you have ever dealt with Elaine, you'll know that she knows a lot about the system. So if you have any questions as we go, please do put them in the chat, and Elaine will do her best to answer questions in real time. If you don't have an answer in this session, what we'll do is we'll take the question away and one of your account managers can get in touch. So if you go next slide, Johnny. We have an agenda for today to last an hour. We may not use the full hour. We may do. I suppose it depends on how quickly we talk. The plan for today is to have a sort of a mixture of technical overview within Hireserve and a little bit of theory. I know probably everyone on the call is recruiters, so we'll try and keep the theory relatively light, but we'll keep it interesting. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you about application forms, why you might use internal or external application forms, and then we're going to go over to killer questions and what you can and can't ask, and then most importantly, how we use them in the system, how we set them up, and what they do basically. So yeah, you carry on, Johnny. There are some frequently asked questions. Now, we always have this in Hireserve Uni because, as you will all be aware, the system is very configurable, and it doesn't mean that everyone will have the system set up in exactly the same way out the box. So the most important part is the functionality does exist. It might need turning on if you can't see it. As it says there, speak to your account manager if that's the case. Most importantly, everything that we are showing you today is free. There's nothing in here today which is chargeable, which I'm sure is great news. And I just wanted to explain in terms of who we are. You may have previously spoken to me or Johnny or Elaine, in fact. Johnny and I are account managers. We look after customers that are existing customers. Elaine tends to work more on the side of doing demos to prospective customers. But a bit about our background. Both Johnny and I have worked in recruitment. I did 2.5 years working for a software company, hiring quite difficult to find roles like software developers and new technologies, where there was a lot of headhunting on LinkedIn. So I know the pain of doing the quite niche recruitment. And Johnny, I don't know if you want to quickly introduce yourself and the recruitment that you used to do.
Sure. Straight out of university, I worked as an agency recruiter at a couple of different agencies in the UK, Germany, and the US. And as part of that agency work, I still help support internal teams on improving their processes. and still take an interest in recruitment, not only in my full-time work, but take some time, even the other month, and went to the recruitment agency expo at the Excel Centre, looking at different technologies that are coming into the market and trying to cut through the noise of AI that we're all experiencing at the moment. So yeah, it's a keen interest of mine. So looking forward to the session today, but a bit there on my background.
Thanks. And in fact, I did laugh at Johnny because he took a day off to go to the recruitment tech show at the Excel, and I think in the neighbouring room there was something like the whiskey show, and I was like, Johnny, just do yourself a favour and go there instead and go get some free samples.
That's where you think I really was, but I think you're right. Maybe I was actually at the whiskey show.
Cool. And Elaine, your background, I know obviously you do a lot of our demos for Hireserve, but your background is more from a software sales perspective, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah. So pretty much 19 years now working with HR systems. So HR covering recruitment, payroll, all other aspects of HR. And the last 3 years working here with Hireserve purely on their ATS side. So not only demoing the product, the configurations of what it can do, but also the future as well, working towards the future and the roadmap and what direction ATSs are going in, because obviously we're taking Hireserve there as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Johnny, I don't know if you want to begin by explaining just a little bit of the theory behind application forms before I start to go in and
Forgive me. Yeah. I've gone too far there. Sorry.
Ruined our before
I
go into actually showing people how to set up application forms in Hireserve, let's just make sure everyone's on the same page talking about what an application form is. So do you want to explain quickly the theory behind that?
Yeah, of course. I'll come off sharing just for now for this section, just to cover a bit around application forms. I think it's really important as an organisation, and since I've been working here at Exceed with Hireserve customers, a topic and a huge topic while we're covering this today is around application forms themselves, because there's so much to unpack within it. I tried to see it as a bit of a sort of sliding scale and a balance to try and find between a very low barrier of entry versus the data capture that you want to include in the application form as a business. But obviously, how much of that are you going to include in the application form to make that barrier entry low as well? So there's a sliding scale really there as to what you want to try and achieve. You tend to see more in smaller organizations, SMEs, all the way down to startups. A one-click applies. We're seeing more and more frequently across all job boards, but of course through to direct applications on career sites as well. All the way up, again, if we're thinking about that sliding scale, my partner recently applied for a role at Lloyd's, where she was quite frustrated, spending quite a bit of time having to fill in quite a lengthy application form. But you could argue an organisation like Lloyd's would expect someone to spend a good amount of time, really think about their application, why they want to work for that business. So again, I think as we're going through today, just consider that sort of sliding scale between what you want to achieve in your application forms. We all know the types of different information we can capture in the application form, but I think a general rule of thumb would be to sort of reduce that barrier to entry and increase the chance of people applying to your positions would be, of course, to not repeat any information in the application form that is available in the CV, regardless of whether a parsing tool is involved at that stage or not. I think that can just get some fatigue into the process unnecessarily if it's repeating what's in the CV already. And also considering around cover letters too. Some organisations want to receive them and want to give candidates the option to share them, but I think I'm certainly seeing the trend more and more that people are firstly being quite open and saying they're not actually reading cover letters. Furthermore, have candidates got the time to write an individual cover letter for each position? There's an argument for each side, but I think one definitely to consider. And the overall point really here is about reducing friction, but also for your own benefits as well, to make sure that you're still capturing information in the application form for your reporting purposes, either later in the process or retrospectively looking back at data. Elaine, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but every field within that application form is at one stage reportable later in the process. If you want to run statistics around whatever it could be, from ED&I to location of the candidates applying, versus the source potentially that application came from. So there's a lot to consider, as I mentioned, that sliding scale between shall we just accept CV straight away to maybe a CV without a cover letter with a short application form, but a few areas for that candidate to shine about some personal information that might bring their application to life a little bit, or why they're particularly interested in the role. You get the idea. I think one other point just to mention in the account as well, we're preparing for this session is around the requirements for candidates. We're talking about barrier to entry, specifically with Hireserve, the requirement for candidates to log in to apply to a position. Few customers that I've spoken to have said that sometimes this can be seen as a bit of a barrier to entry or barrier to apply. You can switch it off if you wish to. We'd advise to have it, security point of view, but of course, if a candidate still applies to a position and uses an email address, as is mandatory, the system will create a user account in the back end of the system without the user necessarily being aware. If that candidate then further down the application process wishes to view the progress of their application, share any more documents with you, they still have the option to go to the system, provide a forgotten your password link, and then still log into the system that way. So a user is always created in the back end, as it is with the candidate record in Hireserve. Just want to think about potentially and get in touch with us about if you'd like to maybe remove that as a first barrier to entry. I think that covers a fair bit in the first instance. I think the last bit just to touch on is around sort of drop-off rates and length of application forms. Statistically, it seems around 10 to 15-minute mark is the sweet spot where someone's been invested and they've spent the time, thinking about the application, not just clicking one apply. But equally, anything beyond that sort of 12 to 15-minute stage, you start to see that drop off. It doesn't matter in the level of seniority of the role, that's what we tend to see. And of course, finally, on mobile, you'd absolutely expect to see a much shorter application form, if possible, based on your structure of your organisation, how you post roles. Because on mobile, really anything needs to be between that sort of 5 to 10-minute max mark. Otherwise, beyond there, you see significant drop-offs, especially on mobile. So just one to consider where your candidates are coming from.
Thanks.
Or what device they're using, sorry. Jamie, sorry, over to
Yeah.
you on application forms.
Thanks, Johnny. And I think the mobile thing is really important. I think, as we all know, the world is going to a place where people are doing application forms or applying for jobs on the train on the way home after a bad day at work. And if you have the first question is, tell us your life story, and they've got to try and type it on a mobile or phone, which obviously with the tiny little keypad, it's not a good experience. So I think that's a really, really good point. Good. All right. Well, I'm going to now share my screen. Please do let me know when you can see it. And we're going to go into Hireserve. So can you see my system?
We've got it.
All right. I now can no longer see anyone. So the role has reversed. As we said at the start, if you want to ask questions, please do ask questions in the chat. And Elaine is on hand to monitor said chat. So I've logged into the system and I am in the hiring manager portal, and this is not where we need to be. Okay, so the first things first is all of the application form interactions, everything that we're doing here is going to be in the back end of the system. So let's be honest, we know it's more complex, shall we say, but we're going to go in here and we're going to turn off the hiring manager portal and go into the old trusty back end of Hireserve. So application forms. Hopefully, if you're an admin, hopefully you've got a fair idea of where we're going to go throughout this session. But if not, I will try and be really clear and signpost it. We are recording the session, and we'll send out the recording. So if any of you are frantically scribbling notes or trying to, keep up, you don't have to. You can watch along with me. So if we're doing this in the future, hello again, and hopefully you are following along, but obviously with the ability to pause and rewind, etc. So first things first, we're going to start in config at the bottom left. We're going to go into configuration, we're going to go into forms, and we're going to our form creator. And as you'll see, in my demo account, I have 4 application forms. Now, some immediate things to flag. What we're looking at here, 3 of them I don't really use. The one at the top is the one that I use in my demo system, and we can see firstly they're all enabled, which is important. None of them are mobile optimized, which is bad, and one of them, my top application form, is set, like Johnny said, is no login required. So we don't actually need a candidate to create a login to a portal. They actually can apply without. But how do we get to this point? So if I click the pencil icon for edit, we can see here now we've got my my application form. At the top, we have the ability to go into the menu. We can edit the form. We could set it to be mobile optimized. I'm not going to do that for you right now. The point being is, first and foremost, we can see that this form is too long. Um, it is too long. It's because it's our demo system. We add sections to it all the time. We add fields to it all the time. But what Johnny was saying about, the sweet spot being somewhere between 10 minutes, well, about 10 minutes for an application form to be filled in. This is going to be way over that because I've basically asked them every question we could possibly think of. But if we wanted to add another question, how would we do that? So what we can do is, as we scroll down, you see this is divided into sections. So we have personal details, employment history, education history, etc. And if I want to add a question at any of these or into any of these sections, I can do so. As you can see, there's a big green button that says add question. So let's go in here and I'm going to add a question in personal details. So I go add question. First things first, it throws all of the questions I've ever created before at me and says, do you want to use any of these? And if I do, I just use the little green add on the left. I can search. So say, for example, I was looking for something that said postcode. And I search that. I've got a field already that says enter your postcode. So I might go, brilliant, I'm already creating a section, name, address, etc., postcode. Add that question, it's already done for me. But let's say I want to be difficult, I want to add something slightly different. And I go to create your own question at the bottom right. I'm now going to choose what I'm adding, but nearly always it's going to be question. And I can choose straight off the bat, is this mandatory or not? So I'll say, yeah, this is mandatory. And I'm going to type out my question. Now I've got postcodes in my head. I can't think of anything else. So I'm just going to say, in fact, we'll just call it postcode. We'll just say, what is postcode? I need to copy that and drop it down into the field name at the bottom as well. And I need to map this. And the reason I need to map this is if I want it to be reportable in the future, it needs to be mapped. Basically, we're mapping it to the reporting engine. So you can see straight away, there's actually one that says postcode. So that would probably be a good starting point. If you couldn't find something, what you can do is it doesn't look like there's any search functionality, but actually you just start typing. So if I just start typing POST, it finds anything to do with postcodes. So I would see that postal code is there, and it's telling me there is actually another question that exists in the system that allows me to map to postcode. Again, just saying, like, are you sure you want to add another one? But I'll say, yeah, I do, and I'm going to map that to postcode. As I go forward next, it offers me my answer types. Text again, where text field is a short text, text area is long text. Checkboxes, dates, list of values, etc. Obviously, a postcode is a text field. You can see here as well that you can offer people to upload files. So as Johnny said, if you're the type of organization that still wants a cover letter, you could have a question that just says enter your or attach your cover letter, and the answer type would be a file upload. But we're going to go text field. Now, limit to both internet or intranet, which are awkwardly similar. What does that mean? Well, I'll come on to this later, but we have the ability for every question to say whether they get posted to the external website only, the internal website only, or on both websites. Again, I'll come on to that later, but for now, I'm just going to leave this as both. And we're going to finish. And there we go. There's an extra field on my section called personal details. Something to note, and something that is important, is that if you are using the personal details section in another application form, if I update the section here, it will update across all application forms. So just be wary that if you have a section called personal details and for whatever reason you've got a role where you're like, oh, we're not going to ask questions about the address. If I start deleting stuff here, it may affect other application forms. So just be careful and consider, where you're using application forms and the knock-on effects of deleting or adding to the standard form. So we've added a question. Let's say I want to add a whole new section. we've got a couple of options. We can go to the form details menu at the very top. So if you see when I'm hovering over each section, top right, I've got menu bars. If I'm at the top and I want to change the section, I can go and change the sequence of the sections, and I can also change the menus. So basically, what the headers, what they're called. If I want to add a whole new section, I go to the bottom of the screen, go add section, and I can add pre-built sections. So as I just said, you could add personal details, for example. I might, in fact, I looked at this earlier. I think that basically the only section I don't have in the system is data protection. So let's just add that one as well, make this form even longer. I can go here, click the little green plus, and it just drops in all the questions that are saved under the section of data protection. At this point, I can also create a new section in the bottom right, and that's like adding a question. We're going to go through a wizard to create a section. Important to note for later, I think you can only have one killer question section per form, and because I've already got one at the top, I can't choose that option. But if I were adding a new section, this is where I would do that. Anyway, let's not do that. So that is how we add sections to application forms. But something that we need to be aware of is if we're adding questions to application forms, you can see there's lots of different types. So you've got text fields, you've got drop downs, you might have numeric fields, as we said, you might have date fields. Slightly, I don't know if it's counterintuitive. I think it makes sense once you know this, but you might struggle to do this without being explained. When you're creating a question, you don't create your list of values as you create your question. So if you've got a question like, I don't know, do you have a driver's license? And you want to use yes, no, you actually need to create your list of answer values before you create your question. Okay, so might seem counterintuitive, but basically we need to create our list so that when we create the question, we can choose the list of values. Probably the easiest way to think about that. So in order to do that, we actually need to come back out of here and we need to go to our customer settings instead. So weirdly, it's not under forms, it's under customer settings, and we have an option here for lists of values. Now, this bit is really simple to use, again, when you know what you're doing. At first, it looks quite maybe strange, but all we're going to do is we've got lists of values here. So, for example, I created one earlier just called test yes no. Let's show you how we create a new list. Top left, there's the green add record. It adds a line at the top of the page and it looks like not doing anything with this, but all we do is click into the column and we add our list name. So I'm going to call this yes, no in caps. The system now attributes it an ID, and at the point it does that, we can now go into the pencil icon and we can now add our values. So we have a name of this value set is yes, no. We need to go into the plus icon, and I'm going to do it twice because I've got two values to add, yes and no. Same thing, we just click the description, we give it our options, yes and no. And what we can do is where it says sequence, you can choose which one will appear top or bottom by default. So it's a sequential value. So what that means is I can say yes is going to appear first on my form, and that's going to be worth 0 as such, and no is going to be worth 10, and 10 is after 0, so 10 will be no will be lower than yes on the form. Anyway, internally, we tend to use the governance of using multiples of 10 when we create lists, and I'd recommend you do something similar, and I'll explain why in a moment. The system can't handle decimals, so if you use a base of 10, you could have something as 10, 11, 12, 13, which actually gives you a lot more flexibility, and I'll explain this later when we're talking about killer questions. But ultimately, create your list. we internally, if we had 5 options, we'd have 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, for example, and you probably want to do something similar. Anyway, so we've created our list of values, and that's all good. So we've got a thing called yes, no. We've created our list of values. We don't need to save it. You can see that's grayed out. I don't actually need to save it. It just saves automatically. So if I go back to my application form and my form creator, if I add a new question and I want that to be an option, let's go in and add yet another question into personal details. What I'm going to do is say it's a question type. Question, do you have a driver's license? Map that. I'm not going to map it for now for a field because we're just going to get through this quite quickly. List of values is my option. And now it's going to say, what is your list of values? Oh, and I click the list of values and we'll have yes, no in big caps like I just created. And it gives me my options of yes and no, or no and yes. If you've done it like I've just done it and done it wrong and got the sequential ordering wrong, you can either go back and edit that, or you can actually drag it at this point like that. So yes is now above no. Next, we're going to choose the drop down. And I just wanted to explain this because I think it's, unless you understand like the terminology, it might not make much sense. A drop down list is one where you have an arrow and you have to actually click the drop down and choose your option. The radio buttons are going to be something like this. So radio buttons is where you can see both options on the screen and you just choose the one you want. Okay, so drop down is where you can't see a list of all the options, you drop it down. Radio buttons are where you can already see the options on the screen. So I like radio horizontal. I'm going to say next, and it's going to say again, do you want this on both internet or intranet, which I'll come on to later, and do you want a default option? So it's probably best practice to leave this as none selected. You might have scenarios, maybe around like GDPR, where it's best practice to pre-select an option for the respondent. So you might have GDPR, do you agree to our policy? You might say, actually, we're going to say the default option is no, so that the candidate has to physically go in and say, actually, yes, I agree. But I think realistically, leaving it as none selected and then allowing them to just choose yes is probably the same, but probably better practice. But that's up to you. You can preset the default value. And again, we finish. And that's how we'd ask a question that has a list of values. So do you have a driver's license? And the radio buttons horizontal. Okay. Last bit before I hand back to Johnny. Let's say that we want to actually apply this application form to a job. Well, I mean, we're going to need to, right? So what we're going to do is go back out here on the left-hand menu, go to jobs, job summary, and I've got a couple of jobs in my system. One of them is a managing director. So if I go and view that job, hopefully you've all seen this page before and it's quite familiar. And all we're going to do is at the bottom here, application form, choose from my 4 application forms, and that's what's going to power your, what pops up on your website when someone goes to apply for that job. We'll come on to this later around killer questions, obviously, but this is where you would obviously, I keep saying obviously, sorry, this is where you would enter your job description, your summaries, your skills required, etc., to actually flesh out the job description, but the application form is all done from there. Okay. Johnny, I'm gonna stop sharing and hand back to you. Maybe if you want to explain the internal external application page.
Yeah, of course. As we saw there was an option to share to intranet, internet, or both, which I think Jamie's going to unpack very shortly. Just to touch a bit on external application forms and why you may utilize them. You may already, you may not, but I think just a few examples to sort of bring that to life a bit. Obviously, for internal candidates, there's a lot of information we already know about them, so that can be a lot of a more streamlined application form. But I think to try and break it down in a bit more detail, we might see that public sector or for compliance reasons, would look at asking diversity, ethnicity, criminal conviction type questions that they must ask for those external candidates. Of course, for internal applicants, that information should have been captured already and all dealt with. So that can, of course, be reduced or removed from an external application form at that stage. So just a few examples there to consider. Recently, a council that Jamie was working with, all posts internally are being posts for internal applications at this stage, but not external. So, of course, those application forms differ according to that organisation's situation. There's a couple of different examples that you can probably think of yourselves as to why you might want certain questions to show on your internal, but not on your external, or vice versa. So, just one to consider there. I think Jamie's going to unpack that a little bit more about what that looks like within Hireserve for both internal and external application forms.
Yeah, cheers, Johnny. And I think the point you made is exactly that. I think if you've already captured someone's references, if they're applying for an internal post, you're not going to ask them for references again, right? Because you already know them. So that's a good example. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Please let me know when you got it. That was probably my Teams for a moment there. Anyway,
You got it.
You got it. Yeah. So the other thing, when we've created a job and we've appended an application form, you've probably seen this before about your jobs being posted and being live. I don't know if you know this. Hopefully everyone does. Every Hireserve instance comes with the ability for you to have an internal website and an external website. Now, your external careers page, we've got some external careers pages. Some of our customers using these really, really wonderful careers pages. I've got, as an example, I've got one of my favorite ones. Hopefully, people don't mind me doing this, from Jodrell Bank, SKAO. They've got like really nice careers page. It's all mapped to their kind of their theme, and this is their external website. Their internal website, well, it might look the same, but it doesn't need to. It could be a bit more basic. And the point being is, when you post a job, under the intranet on and off page, you have the ability to say whether a role is posted to your internal, your external, or both. So again, intranet, internal, internet, external. And with that, your application forms, if you remember, every field has the ability to be sent to either one or the other, or both. And if I just have a quick look, so if I'm applying for my managing director's job, and I'm applying for this as an external, so I've looked at this as the URL to apply. This is the external one. When I start my search, when I start applying, I have certain fields I need to fill in, and this is what my application form looks like. Obviously, as I say, this is miles too long. If I am an internal candidate, quite simply, those same fields can be different. So it's going to look broadly the same, but we can have different sets of fields. So again, very important that if I am a candidate, we already know who I am. At the final stage about references, you might not need to be entering your reference options. You might go straight through to submit, for example. Again, those those application forms are too long in our demo account, but that's the example of how that works. Okay. So really, I just wanted to say that if you haven't got this set up, you can get in touch with us. We can get this set up, and you can share an internal, vacancies page. Maybe if you use the likes of a SharePoint, you might say, well, actually, as one of your links, you've got your. Oh, okay, brilliant. It's going to make me do that. You can say, we're going to share our internal page, within SharePoint, for example. And if anyone ever goes through to apply for a job, they're going to have a different set of application fields than someone that's found the job on the website. But both candidates will end up in the same pool against the actual job. So hiring for that managing director, my external applicants and my internal applicants will still appear against the same job, but we've captured different information about both. Anyway, that was all I wanted to go into there on the external and internal, and obviously we've got 20 odd minutes left. I think killer questions is important. So, Johnny, I'll hand back to you to explain killer questions.
I will do. Has that come back up now?
Yep.
Excellent, fantastic. This is your image, Jamie, which I quite like. Sorry, would you like me to jump into killer questions? Was there anything you wanted to add at this stage at all?
No?
Excellent. So, killer questions. We're not going to teach you how to suck eggs. I think everyone here knows what killer questions are and why they exist. I think just to touch on it, this is really, again, going back to what I mentioned at the start of the call around that barrier to entry. But this is more really around your purposes and for your benefit to ensure that no one's applying who couldn't fulfill the position for whatever reason. That could be a legal reason, it could be another reason. But something that I worked closely with a customer on recently, who could only recruit in certain locations. They were seeing lots of different applications going from tons of different locations, but they can only accept them from, I think, around 3 or 4 different locations. And just by the very start of all their application processes for this specific job type, they put a killer question in the start to just ask the candidate to confirm, amongst some other information, are you residing in any of these 4 countries? And in doing so, the candidate could then either progress or not based on their information they provided. Jamie's going to share a bit more information around killer questions and how to develop them within the system and the scoring criteria behind that, just some logic behind that and how that works. But killer questions really are there to put in at the start of the application process. As I mentioned just now, we're quickly eliminating anyone who we know can't fulfill that position, not necessarily on their experience or expertise, but mainly for key essential factors to why they can't go forward. As we mentioned they're typical yes or no, and we'll mention Jamie will demo around the sort of scoring around that. There is also a way to do that around multiple choice as well, should the question you're trying to ask or gain the information for require that. And as we mentioned just a few moments ago, these are non-negotiable requirements that you as an organisation would require that person to fulfil if they were to be successful applying for the position. Joe, I don't know if you want to just touch on these pieces around rules and regs, if that's okay.
Yeah, I can do. So, well, in the UK, I mean, I can only speak for the UK, but in the UK, you have to avoid anything that can lead to discrimination under the Equalities Act. If you are joining us from other countries, we have customers all around the world, please do obviously look at your relevant local legislation, and this isn't any legal advice. What you've got to do though in the UK is we've got to ensure that the question is job related and is a genuine requirement, and it's always best practice to try and explain either upfront in the question or via the automatic rejection about why those things were mandatory. So we're not just rejecting things and people and leaving candidates like, thinking that we've done something untoward. So if you go forward, Johnny, a good example of where you or how you can phrase killer questions is as follows. You're not allowed to say, "Are you British?" because that's not really relevant. Obviously, people from all around the world can work in the UK. However, you can ask a question along the lines of, "We can't offer visa sponsorship. Do you currently have the right to work in the UK without employer sponsorship?" That is a fair, easy to understand reason for why you might be auto rejected if you don't or if you require sponsorship. Similarly, you obviously can't ask, "Are you pregnant or having a child soon?" However, I did find some examples where you can ask that in a killer question if the role is, for example, dealing with asbestos. I saw an example where it said you could actually, in that example, say, as a killer question, "This role involves working with hazardous materials, is deemed unsafe for pregnant people. Do you wish to continue your application?" Obviously, that is then giving the candidate the choice about whether they go forward or not, rather than you asking a question with seemingly no context of, "Are you pregnant?" which of course you're not allowed to ask. All right. So yeah, be cautious with what you ask, and where possible, try and explain to the candidate why you're asking what you're asking. Okay. Is it back to me, I think, for the
I think it
actual
is.
showing how to set these up? Okay, so let me take over the screen and I'm back in my application form. Yeah, can you see that?
We can.
Good. So killer questions are just a section on your application form. I've already mentioned that you can only have one killer question section per form, and generally speaking, you're going to want to put it as the first section in the form. Obviously, we don't want to waste candidates' time. We don't want them filling out my very, very lengthy application form only for the final section to be, do you have the right to work in the UK? And they say no, and then they get auto rejected. Much better to get those killer questions dealt with up front. But adding killer questions is very, very similar to anything else we've done, but then there's a bit of a nuance around what we call scoring. So I'll explain that now. If I want to add a question to my killer question set, I'm going to do the same as we did before, add question. So let's create a new question. With the killer questions, you are normally going to have it as mandatory. And my question, let's do the one that we just said. So whatever I just said, I don't know, let's call it working with asbestos. Do you want to continue? Question mark. Let's just do that. Now you might think actually, oh, okay, maximum length for that field is 30 characters. There we go. You might think, well, actually, people won't even fill in the application. They'll just click away, and they might do. Obviously, offering them the ability to say, no, I don't want to continue, does actually mean you get to gather the data. So if they click away, you obviously don't get to retain that data. But asking a question like this would allow you to see how many people you're sort of losing as such or screening out with your killer question. Anyway, you might want to map it to a field, but for the sake of this demo, let's just carry on. Now, with killer questions, the difference you'll see here straight away is you have to do a list of values question. You can't ask a text question because until we've got, AI built in to read an answer, you couldn't ask someone, tell me your greatest achievement, and then go, killer question, your achievement wasn't, great enough. You need a list of values to be able to objectively judge and score on. So I'm going to go next. And my list of values is the same as previous ones we've created. So again, I can go into my big capital yes, no. Let's add that. And again, we get to choose how that displays to the candidate. So I'm going to go with horizontal again, because I prefer that one personally. And again, we're going to go in and say, is this for everyone? And as Johnny's explained, best practice, we probably don't need to ask this question to our internal candidates for certain things, like do you agree, do you have the right to work in the UK as an example? However, for a question like this about are you happy working with asbestos, actually we would absolutely ask that to internal candidates as well, because just because someone's working, a desk job, and they apply for the asbestos job doesn't mean that you've cleared whether they're happy to actually work with that material. So that would be an example where we would have the killer question on both. Again, do we want to preset default values? No, let's leave that alone and we'll do finish. Okay, so we now have 3 questions in our killer questions section. We now need to work out, well, how do we auto reject? That's the whole point, right? The cutting through, if you're receiving 100 candidates for every role, of which 20 could be auto screened out, a fifth could be just auto screened, you need to set that up to be actually, to doing its job, to doing that automation for you. So how do you do it? It's relatively simple, but it does take a little bit of thinking about. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the top of the page again, top right, we're going to go to menu, and we're going to go to default scoring. Okay. Now, this opens up something that looks maybe almost irrelevant to what we're doing, but is totally relevant. You just got to understand how the form works. So firstly, you can set scores against all your questions in your form. That will go into a weighting for a candidate. So like Johnny said, you might have 5 options in your drop down, and it might be something like, tell me your highest level of education, and you might go, GCSEs or O levels, and then the next one A levels, next one degree, masters, PhD, etc. And you might give a different score to each of those. So if someone's got a PhD, they're worth 100 internal points, and if they're GCSEs, they're worth 10, for example. So you can use this to create a weighting on a shortlist, basically. But we're focusing on killer questions today. So what I'm going to do is I'm saying I'm going to set scoring for my killer questions only. So only this section. All right. And what we can do is we can say, drop this down. And here are my 3 killer questions. So at the moment, I've got it set that the first one, do you have the right to work in the UK? No is worth 0. Yes is worth 1. Do you agree to the terms? No is 0, yes is 1. And I've just added this one, working with asbestos. Do you want to continue? No is 0, yes is 1. All right. And then what we'd say is, in order to appear in the killer question banding, you have to be in the top band. Or the middle band. Sorry, you have to be in one of the 2 bands. You can't be below the middle band. Anything below the middle band gets removed, gets auto rejected. But this is where the problem comes with just using 1s. This is why we said that internally we use 10s. Because what I want is I want it to be that if they answer no to any of these questions, they get auto rejected. I need them to be right to work in the UK, yes. Do you agree to the terms? Yes. Do you want to continue working with asbestos? Yes. I need that to be 1, 1, 1. I need all of them to be yeses. So I need the top band to be higher than 2, i.e. I need it to be 3. But I need the middle band to be higher than 2 as well, and I can't have the same value in both. Okay, so this is where we just need to go ahead around this. Whereas if we add the score as 10, 10, and 10, we suddenly got a lot more flexibility. Now the maximum score is 30, and what I can do is I can say to be in the top band, you have to be higher than 29, for example. And if you want to be in the middle band, you have to be higher than, I don't know, 25. So they still need to put yes, yes, yes to score 10, 10, 10. They still need to score 30. Basically, everyone's going into my top band, or they're being rejected because they're below the middle band. So hopefully that makes sense. Just to recap, if I were to say yes, yes, and no, I would score 20 points. I'd be below the middle band scoring. I'd be auto rejected. If I say yes, 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 I'm going to score 30 points. I'm going to go straight into the top band. Depending on what values you use, you can play around with this, and actually you can conceive of a situation where someone is, put forward, but into the middle band. But really, you don't often need to think about that with killer questions. The whole point of killer questions is they are either in or they're out, and that's all we need to do, really. So that is killer questions set up. At that point, I hit finish in the bottom right, and I've now got it set up that they have to say yes to all of those things, otherwise they're rejected. And how do we set up the rejection email? Well, the rejection templates are just set up in the form. So what we would do is in here, in your form section menu, you've got lots and lots of options for auto rejections. So say, for example, in my form, if I've got a candidate that's already applied, for example, you can write out an email. So you can say, dear candidate, you can use mail merge fields, and that's maybe one for another session. But we can say, dear candidate, you have already applied for this role, or whatever you might want to do. You can do the same for killer questions. I actually don't have it on my form, which is not convenient for this session, so apologies, but it is basically the same thing. So it's killer questions, middle band not met, and you are able to go in and write out your template. So again, it's good to be specific and say, dear candidate, you either didn't want to work with asbestos, or you didn't have the right to work in the UK or something. Therefore, we've rejected your application, and that is as far as they'll get on your application form. Finally, though, you could have different killer questions for different roles, because this killer question, if you remember, is a section which will appear on everyone with this application form. So what we could also do is you can do this at the job level as well. So this is the final bit that I think I'll leave you with today. But if I go back to my jobs and I go back to my job summary and go back to my MD's role, I'm in here and we're using our standard application form. But say, for example, I want to ask a question to the managing director that I don't want to be part of my standard killer questions section. What we can do is I can go in here and go to options at the top, and I can actually create job specific questions, as you can see. So I can go job specific question and I can add it to the killer questions here, and I can say, actually, I don't want the working with asbestos one. Again, that's deleted that for the whole section. That's deleted that for everyone. But what I can do is I can go in and add a job specific question below. I can add that there. I could do exactly what we've done, and then I can make it part of the killer question section so that it appears on that particular application form, but not on other roles where that's irrelevant. And I think with that, that is an overview. Hopefully people have learned something, but that is an overview of creating an application form, creating your standard sections, appending them to individual jobs, posting either internally or externally, and obviously using killer questions to auto reject people. At a high level, there's a lot more detail to go into, but I think for a 1 hour session, I think that's as much as we're gonna share. And Johnny, I don't know if you can just share the end of your slide deck with us just before we go. So yeah, I don't know if everyone who's still on the call could do us a favor and John, I don't know if you can make that full screen. I don't if everyone could whip their phones out. I'm sure everyone's got their phone pretty much to hand. If you could open your phone camera and just scan that QR, that'd be very much appreciated. Obviously, putting these sessions together does take us a bit of time, and any evaluation feedback that you've got for us helps shape future sessions. So if you do have the ability to just quickly whip out your phone while we've got a few more minutes and fill that in, that would be much appreciated. If not, people are welcome to start exiting the session. And thank you for attending. Hopefully you learned something. And if there were any questions in the chat, hopefully Elaine's either answered or we'll come back to you on that. So thanks for attending, everyone. And Johnny and I will wait until everyone's left the call. But have a great rest of your day. Matthew's just said that can he get a copy of the recording? Again, everyone will get a copy of the recording probably some point this evening, maybe tomorrow, but that will come out as a recording.
Sorry, I was trying to speak on mute and thought I was interrupting you, but you couldn't even hear me. I was just going to say, if you're very kindly filling out the survey, please do so and let us know what else you want to hear about. I think we're keen as well. I've mentioned to a few customers over the last month or two. I think it'd be great now to bring you guys off mute, as it were, and try and have a bit more of an interactive session about a topic that, to be honest, we haven't yet decided on yet. But there's plenty even to unpack in application forms. But a few customers mentioned they'd be keen to understand how others are utilising Hireserve for large-scale recruitment projects and also even smaller projects too. So if there's that opportunity to learn from other customers and that's of interest, I'd be keen to facilitate a session like that. I'm sure Jamie would be happy to too. So yeah, please let us know as wild and wacky and as useful as possible suggestions. We're happy to hear them and delivering them for you later in the year and beyond.
I'm on mute now. Stephen, I will make sure that your account manager gets in touch about assessment criteria. And I think, yeah, we could either do that as a separate session or I'll get someone to reach out to you about what you're struggling with there. Thank you all. Oh, Alice has asked a question. Feel free to have the questions coming in or do it on the evaluation form. Alice, to answer your question, I think one application form per role, but you can choose. I mean, you can effectively create two application forms on one application form. So you'd have all your questions that you want to be internal only, and you'd have all your questions that are external only, and you'd attach one application form to the role. But depending on whether they're internal or external, the candidate would see two wildly different application forms if you wanted to do it that way. Good. I think we're going to start removing people, and the only reason I say that is just because it makes the recording go on miles too long. As we know, we once had a recording that lasted about 8 hours because I forgot to remove the last person from the call.
Very detailed and informative session, I'm sure it was, for the whole 8 hours. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
All right. Cheers, guys. Bye bye.
Thanks, guys.